I have this thing with the Manchester Evening News. Funny, in my Facebook feed, I very rarely now get anything from the Manchester Evening News. And I used to be forever commenting on the Manchester Evening News' reporting. But I don't seem to get Manchester Evening News articles anymore. Because I would always object to the way that they reported on practically everything that happened. An example of the way they go about things would be like BMW crashes into Aldi store, which happened in Rochdale. Somebody managed to drive straight into Aldi, but the headline was BMW, and it's like you blame the car. You get it where BMW or Audi crash, man killed or injured when Audi crashes into. They report like that. And it's like, what have you got against German cars? Now, cars don't do things on their own, do they? They don't just decide to, like, some kind of old Nazi code kick in and the car decides to commit some kind of act of terrorism against the driver. There's no such thing as that. So they word everything in a way as to nobody's held accountable. But if they can hold an inanimate object accountable, they will. And it's always the same writers. There used to be a situation with them as well where, this kind of joke I like, a joke that George Galloway's actually stolen, as to where we now call, like London, South Rochdale, we now call Huddersfield, East everywhere's Rochdale. It's just the whole country's actually Rochdale. I got that idea originally from the Manchester Evening News because they made Wythenshawe, which is South Manchester, 20 miles away, part of Rochdale. It would be Rochdale man, and it'd be somebody from Wythenshawe, as to where Huddersfield, obviously, it's East Rochdale. But it's like Charlie's West Rochdale. This is the way that they go about it. It's like, if they want to stick like a label on something, they default it to Rochdale. It's like, no, Wythenshawe's not part of Rochdale. Have you ever looked at a map? They're forever doing it. So it's like Middleton, which is Manchester. Always Rochdale man, and it's Middleton. I'm like, I'm sick of this. But that's what they do. They change the geography to better suit the story because they don't like bad things said about Manchester. So they just transfer all the shit onto Rochdale in headlines. Been going on for years. And whenever it happens, I'm there with, oh, hello. Again, you blaming the car for the bad driving. You see a piece of dangerous, deadly driving, and it be, say, Mercedes-Benz crashes into restaurants. And then you're left in your imagination thinking about, how did that car get from that road into that restaurant? And it's always that the car must have been doing about 60 or 70 mile an hour in a 30. That's always the answer to it. And it'd be a matter of, there's a mate of mine who lives local, and we know the roads around here, and when there's a car crash, I'm like, so how's that happened? And he's someone who's, he runs a pub, so he hears all the gossip. He finds out. Somebody always knows, and the word gets around, so I asked my mate. And he'd be, how do you manage to get on the wrong side of the road, crashed into a restaurant? And it's like, by not having a driving licence and not understanding the highway code and not really understanding the car you're driving. But don't worry, he's with Allah now. So, all right, so it's like a 16, 17-year-old Pakistani kid who's dead in his dad's car. Yes, that's what's happened. But the story would be something completely different. What am I getting at here? Well, the same media outlets do things like, when there's been a crime and the perpetrator is black or Asian, they don't give a description. They say we're appealing for witnesses, but they don't give a description of the perpetrator if the perpetrator is not white. They always do it. And I see it from them, and they're part of the Mirror group, the Manchester Evening News. So they're in essence politically aligned heavily towards the Labour Party, the local authority. They're part of an authoritarian Labour conglomerate regime, which is the councils, the police, the now regional government, the Andy Burnham government. They're part of that. So it's like they give us just enough information to make us feel as though we're informed, but they actually gaslight us endlessly. Because when there's no description, everybody knows what it means. It means that it was a black or Asian person. Youths, they just say youths. When they say youths and don't name people and don't give descriptions, it's quite easy to assume that it's a Pakistani or a black kid. And this isn't about Pakistanis or black people. This is about the way the regime reports on it that gaslights the public deliberately. So, see, I'm getting to somewhere here, aren't I? I'm not just talking about BMWs. I'm not just talking about, Nazi hacks in vehicles, sort of engine management computers and the like. I'm not talking about that, am I? I'm talking about how things happen that lead to, like, race riots to some degree. And it be withholding of information that gaslights people, because we know that youths, and we know that no description being given of the perpetrator, no name being given of the perpetrator, means somebody of either Asian or black descent. We know this. So it's like, it could be said that, like, those who've kicked off around the country over the atrocity in Southport have been gaslit. They've actually been, the government have made it happen, either through deliberately gaslighting or accidentally gaslighting. They're responsible for that. Why? For giving no information whatsoever. So when we get no information, we know what it means. We always know what it means when there's no information given. We don't have journalism in this part of the world because they report on something, but they never follow it up. You never find out what happened. Something's reported on, no names are named, no descriptions given, although we're appealing for witnesses who can come forward and give us information, but they don't give descriptions. There'll be manhunts going on and they don't give us descriptions of who they're looking for. As if those who know they know and will come forward because we've put it out on social media. Yet at the same time, if you've got a white face and you wanted for shoplifting, they'll put your picture on, they'll put your picture and your name and your address and your last known location and acquaintances on social media, like a wanted poster. This person's wanted for shoplifting. Hardly a high crime. So it's like they've got a way of doing this. They're stirring up racial division deliberately. And they've been doing it in this part of the world for the last 5-6 years, as far as I'm concerned. They don't give us any information because they wouldn't want to be seen to be. So everything's filtered. So as long as all the information's filtered, and this is a pattern that's been going on for years about how they report something, don't you think that it works then as a dog whistle as to say, well, this guy's obviously... So they've done it deliberately. When they've not put out a sufficient information to the people, they've done this deliberately. Not putting information out, that actually tells people, it sends a clear message because of the pattern of behaviour of the way that they report. I just can't see that there's a way that you can blame a car for a car crash, or blame a car manufacturer for a car crash. I'm waiting for the day that BMW decide to sue the Manchester Evening News for implying that their cars have got minds of their own and crash into supermarkets and restaurants. If I was them, I'd do it. What are you trying to say about our vehicles? The BMW owners are not accountable for their behaviour? Well, it obviously depends on what colour they are. I'm not having a go here at brown or black people. I'm having a go at the way that things are reported. I put it to you, there's trouble that goes on, these things that we've seen brew up, right? I'm reading today from all corners of the left-wing press that the social media companies have a lot to answer for. It's like, no, they haven't. That misinformation that they're attributing, and I have to say it was a thing, wasn't it? That misinformation got around the world. How was that misinformation allowed to get around the world? Well, in a vacuum, where no one was saying anything. Tick just put a post up, he made a good point. It's like within an hour of that Southport incident, they were able to say that they believed that it wasn't terror related. He made the point that if they knew within an hour that it wasn't terror related, that they certainly knew what it was down to, and they could have told us and averted all that trouble. But they didn't. Within an hour they knew it wasn't terror related, but they weren't willing to tell us anything else. Not terror related implies something. Yeah? In this country, it implies that the person who did it was Muslim. It implies that because of the way we've been trained to process the information. It's like our media caused those riots because they left a vacuum. Our police created those riots because they created an information vacuum. You see, that's the thing. When I read on the Manchester Evening News website that there's been an incident and they're looking for a youth, I know something already about the crime because of what they didn't say. They give us no details, although they asked for witnesses to come forward. So I already know something about it. And they'll be saying, well, that's you're projecting, it's because you're racist. It's like, no, it's because you're racist. You have an MO, you have a pattern of behaviour that appears that you're frightened that you might possibly upset certain communities when there's no reason to believe that at all. You know what they're really afraid of? Do you know the powers that be are afraid of? Right? That those right-wing guys in the street actually get to talking to the rank and file of the Muslims who've got the same concerns as they have and don't appreciate this kid glove treatment because it's condescending. That's what they're afraid of. They're afraid that the people on the right will discover that the people, the Muslim populations are more conservative than even them. They're doing everything they possibly can so that the white working class and the Muslim working class never ever join forces because that would be the end of them. When they look at each other and realise that they're very much the same. That the clannishness that's attributed to both sides is in fact false. You think if my next door neighbour was up to no good, like a wrong'un, do you think that I would cover up for his behaviour because he's white? And the answer is absolutely not. And that's true as well of the Muslim population. Only certain elements are clannish in that way, in the same way as in the white population. Only certain people are clannish in that way too, and they tend to be criminals who've got filth on each other. Can be clannish like that, but that only accounts for a very, very small minority of people. But it's those very small minorities of people that are pandered to and protected. We're seeing it's quite easy to actually see the other side of the game that's being played. I wish I could get him on my channel. A meeting a couple of weeks ago of the old Workers' Party of Rochdale. I found myself, because I had to sit at the back, because I can't stand. It was standing room only and I can't stand for very long. So I'm sat next to a taxi driver who's been in Rochdale for about 45 years, been in his 60s. And he says, if the council would have listened to me 20 years ago, and he'd gone to great lengths, this fella, to report on something about the lack of a vetting process in who gets to be a taxi driver, and then that leading to the grooming gang thing, the lack of a vetting process. And he's talking he was talking just like me dad, who's also a taxi driver, who'd be roughly the same age as him. You're having exactly the same conversation as my father used to have with me, and his friends would have with me, who were all also taxi drivers. There's no vetting process. It's like they want you £500 a year or whatever it is to be on the road, but they don't care about who they're letting do the job, because it's a trust job. You want to be able to put, you want to be able, and this is what he was saying, our job is doomed if people don't trust us with their loved ones. So we need to be professional and reliable so people actually use our service again. So it's really, really important that people who drive taxis are of good character. And it's like, there's plenty of them aren't. They just decide that's what they want to do. They go and fill the form in and the council says, there you go. You've paid your fee, you can be a taxi driver. And it's like, they haven't got a clue who's doing the job, when it's a job that's based 100% on trust and repeat business. So he was saying 25 years ago, and he had family who were politicians in Rochdale, and he went to them and he put this to them and he made the case, and they said, no, we're not going to talk about that. Why? Because we might be accused of being racist. Who was it who was raising the objection? A man who was born in Pakistan. Understanding what side his bread was buttered, as to say that sexual predators driving round in taxis is bad for business. And he'd be absolutely right. And that's what we've been talking about in our line of work. He's retired now because the COVID thing completely ruined the business. So he's retired because of that. But he says, on our side of the street, that's all that's been talked about for the last 20 years. And no one listened to us. Because the predominantly white council being afraid of being seen as being racist. And they'll put the public at risk. They'd sooner put the public at risk than be seen as being racist by, say, the media. They'll put the public at risk. And this is what we're up against. It's like, we've got a big problem with narcissism in the media. We've got a big problem with narcissism in politics. And it's like, the hypersensitivity to criticism that goes along with narcissism is destroying our country, because they're not listening to feedback. It's destroying our country. That's what's killing us. The hypersensitivity to criticism as to where you're dealing with narcissists, and then when you're dealing with narcissists, critical words become to them like violence that cuts right to the bone. And now we've got a government built upon it. We've got a Labour government now who can't handle criticism because that's the nature of that kind of people, that the people who are drawn towards power can't handle words. And violence, these guys are so, violence is so alien to them that they're afraid of the idea of it. And they panic. Like they've learned what they know about violence from watching movies. And the idea of it haunts them. They can't handle it. So when it rears its ugly head, they panic. And then they make knee-jerk decisions that end up, in essence, leading to more, not understanding what they've conjured with their avoidance and their inability to listen. I'm telling you guys that there's bad times ahead. And for the people on the right, you know, it's like, do you know the allies you seek? The allies you seek in order for there ever to be a meaningful movement that restores this country to sanity. You're treating them as if they're one homogenous blob and saying that they're the enemy, when your enemy is the same as their enemy, and your enemy is the government. You've been set up and set on another community of people, and they're doing their best to set them on you while they fuck everything up and try not to be held accountable. It's like, see sense. The minute this country sees sense like that, we'll start to see our problems suddenly become something more manageable.